Yep, Supermang is still not running, but on this episode of Carnage, we're hoping to change that. Hey guys, and welcome back to Carnage. You know, I was looking at the stats the other day and I realised that almost 50% of you are not subscribed to the channel. So spend a couple seconds, reach down, hit that subscribe button right now, and don't forget to hit the bell as well so you get all the notifications. Right, well now that's out of the way, let's talk about Supermang, which is being a bit of a problem child. Actually, most of the problems have revolved around this stroker V6. It's a 4.2 litre rather than the normal 3.8 litre we deal with. And being that it's a 4.2 litre, the big end of the con rod moves in a much larger arc than what would be normal, and therefore the con rod bolt is coming too close to the camshaft. Well, not just too close. With the first cam, which is this one, this is Mace Engineering's 606 grind. It was actually hitting the camshaft and stopping the rotation of the motor, and luckily we discovered that before we hit the key. So that would have been bad if we'd hit the key and tried to start it and have, you know, the con rod come around and smash into the cam. It would have been a bad day. So we reached out to Mace Engineering and got them to send out their 605 grind, which is a bit smaller in duration and lift. And it did clear. So we put that in and it cleared and I was kind of happy to send it like that until I stuck a camera in there and discovered just how close the tolerances are. And the tolerances were that close that a thin film of oil on the camshaft was transferring off the camshaft onto the rod bolt as it was coming past. That's how close it was, that a film of oil was transferring from one part to the other. We're talking a thousandth of an inch there, and so we're not comfortable running the engine like that. You know, you throw in some heat and some expansion and some RPM, maybe, you know, a timing chain that may or may not, you know, loosen up, and you're going to have a bad day if things come together. So we talked to guys at Mace Engineering, and they've sent us out, well, they've gone to Crow Cams and got a cam reground with a reduced base circle. And what that means is, if you look at our camshaft here, this area at the back of the lobe, that's your base circle, so to speak, all right? So your base circle can start way back here if it needs to be, but basically in the opposite end of the lobe is going to be your base circle. So on our new camshaft, that is reduced in size, and therefore the whole lobe will be reduced. It'll still have the same duration and still have the same lift and all that sort of thing, but it's working off a smaller base circle to start off with. So that's what we've got, and we're going to put it in and check how much clearance we've got now. And I think it should be fine, but let's have a look at that. Right, well, there's our new cam straight out of the box, and I'll just tell you that the difference isn't obvious. I mean, there's the two cams side by side, and I can see the difference here holding the two cams side by side, but I don't think you're going to see the difference there on the camera. However, it is a smaller base circle. If you're interested in the specs are on the intake, 516, you know, 0.516 of an inch lift. On the exhaust, 0.532 of an inch lift. Duration at 50 is 215 on the intake and 227 on the exhaust. So much larger on the exhaust, which is pretty typical with a supercharged cam, and won't hurt a turbo grind either. So yeah. So we're going to throw this into the engine, and I'm going to stick a camera in there and see how much clearance we've got this time. Right, well, let's get this camshaft gear off here, get the other cam out. Okay, so let's slide in our new cam and make sure it's got enough clearance around everything. So now we're just going to dummy assemble the setup. I've got to pop this crank gear off for the moment because I had it set up advanced. I was experimenting with advancing and retarding the cam, so I've got to reset it to 0. Right, put that on 0. Put it about there. Okay, rotate crank. So 0 is pointed at the top, which is, so we want that tooth there pointed basically at the center. Gear on. On up dot. So we've dummy assembled our cam. It is basically lined up dot to dot, and we'll rotate the engine over, make sure it doesn't hit anything. Right, let's just start by rotating the engine over slowly. I have high confidence that it is not going to hit anything. There we are, back to the start again. So do that again. Right. There we are, dot to dot. Okay, so we've got clearance that way, but that's not the first time I've done that. So I have tried other cams and got clearance, but now we need to stick a camera in there and make sure it actually has clearance. So I'll flip it back over again. Okay, so I have borrowed an inspection camera from the guys at Max Performance. We're going to feed it down in there. It's got a little bendy end on it that you can control. So we can stick it down there, have a look, whoop, point it that way, and see what we can see. Well, it appears to have, well, not miles of clearance, but a lot more clearance than it had before. All right, so just watch that lobe and that rod bolt. They pass each other, but they're very close. There's no doubt that is very close. And there's no way of actually getting anything in there to measure that. There's too much material in the road. But yeah, looks like it's gone flat. So the camera tells us we've got clearance. It's not a lot of clearance, but at least it's more than we had before. So now we need to put some lifters and some rockers on this thing and get our adjustable length push rods so we can do a push rod check. Because the push rod length will have changed now because of the reduced base circle of the cam. So we're going to probably need a longer push rod. But yeah, we need to take some measurements. To check our push rod length, we need to get on the base circle of the cam, which is easy enough to do with a dial indicator. But if you haven't got a dial indicator, the simplest method would be to bring the engine to top dead center on the firing stroke, which will have both valves closed, and generally you'll be on the base circle of the cam there as well. So we're going to check probably the intake side. So we'll slide this down here, get on our intake lifter. And then we'll make some adjustments with our little dial indicator here to get on top of that. Might move it over a bit. About there. Lock it in place. So we'll start by rotating the crank slowly, and we should see that our lifter and push rod are not moving, as you can see by the indicated needle. So nothing's moving. Until we get all the way around to there. Okay, so we'll go back to top dead center. You can see it's changed slightly because of just the angle of the push rod. But you can see we're on the base circle of the cam, which is what I was trying to indicate. All right, so we are on the base circle. So that's a good place to take our measurement. So we'll ditch this for the moment. So now we'll take our adjustable length push rods. Now this one being a fairly short push rod with just over 7 inches long, we'll use our shorter checker. So I'll wind that in. And I'll work out which is going to be the best place, best way to do this. Is it going to be that end? Once you've got your rocker bolted down and your checking push rod in there, you can just rock the rocker back and forth. You can tell that's way too loose. So now I shall wind it up. Just wind it up till it's finger tight basically. Just check along the way, make sure nothing's binding. Alright, basically that's 0 right there. Rocker doesn't move, push rod isn't binding on anything. Alright, so that's 0, but what we need is some lifter preload because it's a hydraulic lifter. You want somewhere between 30 to 60 thou of lifter preload. You don't want more than that. If you go too high on the lifter preload, if the lifter ever pumps up, it'll pump up hard and extend that lifter preload into your valve basically, and your valve will hang open. And if the piston's coming up the bore and the valve hangs open, you could have a bad day if your valve to piston clearance is too tight. So we need to wind in probably somewhere around 40 to 50 thou of lifter preload in there, which is basically 1 full turn on the push rod. So what I can do there is just draw a line on the push rod. I'll draw a line there and there, and what I'll do is do 1 full turn. I'll pull it out, do 1 full turn, we'll push it back in and just do a quick check, make sure it's not pushing the valve open at all, but that should be about right, and then we'll take it out and measure it. That is my plan. Tighten our lifter down and just make sure that when we tighten it all the way down, it's not actually holding the valve open. That definitely unseated the valve, so I might have to pull that out and recheck that. So I just ran into a little problem there while checking the lifter preload, extending the push rod out, did 1 full turn and it hung the valve open. I'm like, that shouldn't happen. So I reduced to half a turn on the push rod, which is not enough preload, mind you, and it still hung the valve open. I'm like, Okay, we've got a problem here. What's going on? So I pull the rocker and the push rod out, and I get a longer push rod and push down on the lifter, and the lifter's not moving. The lifter was locked solid. And I'm like, what the hell? And I go check some other lifters and they're moving. Okay, that's okay, but some of them are also locked solid. I'm like, what? And this is why I don't pre-soak lifters. Now, I squirted some oil on there, you know, just to keep people happy. And I do generally oil the lifters as I'm putting them in. But this had a stack of oil in it. I mean, I don't soak these lifters. And I explained that in an earlier video. I don't soak the lifters. I copped a bit of shit for it because people are like, oh, you always got to soak your lifters, blah, blah, blah. This is what happens. You end up with a lifter full of oil, locked solid, and it'll hang your valves open on startup. So, don't soak the lifters. Oil them, sure. Soak the roller end, sure. You know, you want as much oil in this roller end as you can. So if you soak half the lifter, that's fine. But you get oil down there in the plunger, you lock the plunger up to the top, you're going to have a bad day one of these days. You know, it'll work for some people, other people, you know, if you've got enough piston and valve clearance, it'll work until the lifter bleeds down. But for some people, their startup's going to end up with a real bad day. So, and it certainly hurts when you're checking push rod lengths and find out you can't actually get the right length because the lifter's locked solid. So anyway, we have movement on the lifter now. I can push down on the lifter. That's good. So just be aware of pre-soaking lifters, locking your lifters solid. You do not want to do that. I'm going to pull this apart, empty whatever oil's in there so it's got some movement, and I'll put it in the exhaust side. So I've got one for the intake, I'll put that in the exhaust side. I want to check both sides to make sure that the push rod length is going to be the same for both before I order my push rods. But yeah, this is why you pre-assemble things. Take the top out. Pop the plunger out. And yep, it's full of oil. Check this out. There's a spring. Don't lose that. But yeah, way too much oil. One full turn. Lock him up there. And then we'll check it, because that's what found the problem last time. Oh, just watch the valve as we tighten up to 0. Make sure the lifter, make sure the valve does not move. Okay, valve did not move. Push rod is pretty much locked in place. Okay, I think that's our length. Let's measure it up. Wow, what a process this has been. Usually it's much easier, but usually we don't have problems with locked up lifters. Okay, just make sure those marks have not moved. Nope, still in line. All right, well, that's our length. We'll measure that and work out what it is. Right, so we'll just measure our push rod. That's it right there. What have we got? 7.0 050 basically. Okay, so I have checked both sides now. both lifters and the push rod lengths are the same. So basically 7 and 50 thou, so 7.050 is what we're going to go with. Now that is the length of the exhaust push rods that we were running. So we've got 6 push rods that are the right length. Now the other ones are now 50 thou too long, and so we shall have to go buy some more push rods. So 6 push rods of 7 and 50 basically. That's what we need. So we'll get those, go to Crow Cams, we'll go get them in the engine and get this thing together. So this has been a bit of a mission in all respects. So anyway, we should have enough preload on our well, I mean, I can actually see they're not topping out. So it is what it is. All right, let's go get some push rods.
A few moments later.
Right, so I've had some lunch and I've gone down to Crow Cams and got the push rods. So now we have 12 push rods that are all the same length. That is 7 inches and 50 thou, so 7.050 inches long. And yeah, now we need to put it all together. But I think I've shown you how this engine goes together so many times now, we don't need to show it again. So what I'm going to do is pull the cam out, lube it up properly, get everything in place properly, and we'll come back to you guys once the engine's sitting in the engine bay ready to fire up. Sound like a deal? Cool, because that's the way it's going to be. All right, I'm going to hook in and get this thing together. We'll see you shortly. And here is where we've ended up. Now I did say I wanted to get the engine in this episode, but that just hasn't happened. You may have noticed I am by myself this week, so not only do I need to do all of this stuff, I've got to do all of that stuff behind the camera as well. So with that in mind, I have got the engine complete from sump to manifold. Now I just need to drop it in the car, get the blower on it, fire it up and see how she runs. But you're going to see all that on a future episode of Carnage, and hopefully next week we get this thing on the dyno. See you then.